Straighten up and fly right. Straighten up and fly right. Straighten up and fly right. Cool down, Papa, don't you blow your top. Ain't no use in diving. What's the use of jiving? Straighten up and fly right.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second in our series of 4 lectures. We appreciate your coming tonight. I'm very honored to present our speaker tonight, Dr. William Oldson, who's a professor of history and director of the Institute on World War II and the Human Experience at FSU. Dr. Oldson received his BA from Spring Hill College, went on to earn a MA and a PhD from Indiana University following research as a Fulbright Scholar in Bucharest, Romania. He has taught at FSU since 1969 and published 3 books on modern Romanian history and the Holocaust. The son of a World War II veteran, he founded in 1997 the World War II Institute, which received a wonderful collection in 1998 following the publication of Tom Brokaw's book, The Greatest Generation. As you can imagine, veterans and their families sent all kinds of memoirs and letters, and Tom Brokaw selected the World War II Institute at FSU as the repository for this collection, and he became a major supporter of the Institute. Tonight, we're particularly pleased that Dr. Oldson is here to share stories based on his recently published book that is based on the letters of a Thomasville native, Captain Joseph Upchurch. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Oldson, and Ann's going to get his video working.
Thank you very much. And I have to thank all you good people for coming tonight. I want you to know how impressed I am that you would turn out on Mardi Gras to listen to a history professor. You obviously have courage. What I'd like to do for you tonight, give you a little warning, is I want to talk about Joe Upchurch, but I want to do it in a very broad context of how it fits into World War II letters in general, and then how important these letters such as Joe Upchurch's and the link to Thomasville is. Let me begin by saying that running the World War II Institute is a lot of fun. It's like Christmas every day. You never know what you're going to find when you come in. If I can give you an example, right now on my desk there's a box about this big, weighs over 200 pounds. It's 3 feet long, 2 feet wide. It's a pair of Japanese binoculars. We've been told we were going to get Japanese binoculars, and we thought it'd be something around a neck. What it turns out, it's off a capital ship. And it's not merely binoculars, it's a rangefinder. Now, the reason I point this out is to contrast it with the letters. We get this box with no information. We have no idea of why the man got it, how the man got it. I'd love to have a chance to interview him or having the papers that went along with it. Those of you who are vets would understand that when you take a Luger or you got a flag, you stick it in your duffel bag and you come home with it. My grad students, 2 of them can't pick this thing up. Now, obviously, there's a story behind it. He bribed somebody, had a very friendly supply sergeant. How'd he get it home? The beauty of the letters is that they give us more context. Pat Upchurch's generosity has enabled me and the people who use, my students, the researchers who use this sort of material, to get a better feel for this sort of thing that goes on behind the scene. The interesting thing about Joe Upchurch and letters of this sort is the letters from the heart. He never expected these letters to be read by anybody except his girlfriend and his fiancée, then his wife, Pat, or by his parents. The importance of this is that there's no spin to it, or to put it in more modern terms, there's no politically correctness to it. He's telling it as he sees it. He's telling what's important to him. He's telling about his Thomasville background, commenting about the high school, his family's building here, the family business. It gives a life and color to World War II that you can't get anywhere else. Not out of the movies, not out of textbooks such as I've written. It's from the heart then, and very, very personal. In terms of understanding Joe Upchurch and the men like him, let me point out a few things to you. First of all, the youth of these people. Joe Upchurch is barely out of Thomasville High. The average B-17 pilot, which he ends up being, is 20 years old. I don't know if you have any kids in school right now. Both my boys are older, but I'm thinking back to when they were 20 years old. I can't imagine them in the skies over Ploiești, which is what Joe Upchurch did. If you're a gunner on one of these planes, you're probably 18. This is a young man's war. The background to all this, and why I'm emphasizing the youth of these people, is there was a great number of surprises to the designers of a B-17 or B-24. If you read the letters or read the history books about this, we had to learn a number of things. We thought, when we first put these things in the air, they would be relatively invulnerable. Not flying in formation came as a surprise. Fighter planes came as a surprise. The fact that we weren't properly equipped. When you read the Upchurch letters, you're going to find out he's been flying for quite a while over Europe before he gets a heated flying suit. One of the letters to Pat is about how glad he is to have an English flying suit. Try to imagine being at 20,000 feet and 40 below. You're a turret gunner, or excuse me, a waist gunner in the back, just an open window. We got 20-year-olds then flying under these conditions. We don't have armored turrets, we don't have heated suits, and we don't have long-range fighter planes. What this adds up to is an extraordinary, atrocious casualty rate. If you're not aware of it, when the 8th Air Force first started flying out of Britain, they were required to fly 25 missions. As awful as it sounds, the average crew, as a crew, completed 14. That doesn't mean everybody was dead, but it means something happened, and the crew was broken up in some way. If you're like Joe Upchurch, flying out of Foggia, Italy, it's worse. 50 missions. If you have a chance, if you look at the book I put together of his letters, we also included a number of cartoons. It's one of the things the men did. They drew cartoons in their off time. One of the cartoons that appeared in the base newsletter at Foggia shows a young man standing on a cliff. He's looking down, death that way. He's looking up, and this beautiful sun, and it's labeled 50. And he's trying to make a decision. Which is the best chance? The implication is jumping off the cliff. The flak, the fighters, and the maintenance problems mean that you're probably not going to make it. Whole squadrons are lost. And if I can give you one example from my own experience, my father was a maintenance officer in North Africa. Never talked about it, with one exception. He told my mom something which she passed on to my brother, my sister, and I. My father was told to get the planes in there. By the way, he went on to a career in the Air Force, was a squadron commander, maintenance squadron commander in SAC. He was told to get the planes in the air. He said he could do it. But never mind the fighters, never mind the flak. They couldn't get back. Or if they got back, it was a great deal of luck. The planes were worn out. We didn't have the right parts. 20-year-olds then, 18-year-olds, men who haven't been to college yet or have a little bit of college, like Joe Upchurch. All this is going to turn up in the letters, but in a very peculiar way. First of all, you have to understand why they write. This is not an ordinary letter writing situation. First of all, your letters are going to be read. If you're an officer and gentleman, like Joe Upchurch, you sign your name on there. It's theoretically, they're not going to be read. If you're not so designated by Congress as to be an officer or a gentleman, if you're an enlisted man, you know they're going to be read. Incidentally, by the way, I interviewed an Army censor from World War II. He put his arm around me and laughed, and he said, "Bill, we should let the Germans read the letters. They'd be so confused we would have won sooner." Be that as it may, the men are looking over their shoulders as they write these letters. They're bored. They want something to do. Not all the time in the air is terror, or the whole life isn't terror. They've got all sorts of time on their hands. And again, it's not the letter, the written letter. You'll find that they do all sorts of things. Joe Upchurch plays linguistic games. You'll also find cartoons. One I've just mentioned is from a base newsletter. Joe drew on the envelopes. We have one set of letters at the Institute. Man's another one of the 20-year-olds. He's writing home to a wife who's 18. He's never seen his baby, a little girl. So he writes to the wife and draws cartoons for the little girl. The letters aren't simply to relay facts or certain types of facts. They're meant to keep in touch, yes, but it's keeping in touch in a very special way. You don't tell the horror stories. We have approaching 7,000 collections in the Institute right now. Anything from a single diary to some that, we've got one collection that has 6,000 letters in it. 3 brothers, different parts of the war, writing to mom. You rarely find anything about the Gore for several reasons. 1, the censor, obviously. 2, you don't want to tell the people at home what it's like. There's a certain amount of self-censorship. The only change or little difference you would find here is at one point Joe Upchurch wanted to give his wife, wanted to give Pat some idea of what was going on. So he announces, this is for the censor's benefit, because she's reading between the lines, he says, Pat, I'm going to write you a short story. And then he tells her, this is what a mission might be like. This is what the mission might be like where I got my Purple Heart. And you and I know he pretty well told her what the mission was like. But if challenged, if anybody says anything to him, he can say, no, it's just a short story. By the way, this is a gimmick that a lot of the men used. We have a Navy collection. Man was what was the officer in charge of the armed guard. When the merchant ships were making the Murmansk run, they got a 3-inch gun on the front. This is supposed to protect them from submarines. Good chance. Anyway, the man got himself a pack. If you remember what the old airmail stationery looked like, he had a bunch of this, and every day he would write, in quotes, a letter to mom. When challenged by the executive officer, invariably he said, when we get to port, I'm going to mail this to my mom. Well, FSU has 300 pages of airmail letters never sent to mom. Basically, it's a diary, which was against regulations. The other thing that's so difficult to deal with is that we only have the letters going one way. We have the letters coming home. Obviously, if you're an infantryman, you've got no place in a foxhole to store letters. If you're on a ship, if you're on a base, maybe you can save the letters. We almost lucked out. Joe Upchurch saved all of Pat's letters and his parents' letters. At the end of the war, he's ferrying one of those dilapidated B-17s home, stops in Puerto Rico. The letters are under the pilot's seat. He goes to the officers' club, comes back out, there's been a fire, an electrical short. So again, in reading the letters like this, you kind of have to read between the lines. Once in a while, once in a long while, you have a letter from the other side. And I want to read one to you. This is from mom writing to her son. And it'll give you some idea of the importance of letters at both ends of the circuit. This is November 2nd, 1944. Hello, son. Your letter came today, and I can't tell you how glad I am you got back. You know I never could put my emotions into words, let alone put them down on paper, but you do know how much I love you and what you mean to me. You are my world, everything. So you can guess how I felt when word came that you were missing. The light of my world went out for 2 weeks. I knew you weren't coming back, but I never stopped praying that God would hold on to your right hand and bring you and the boys safely back. Remember that line of prayer I used to write you when you were in Alaska? I, Jehovah thy God, will hold thy right hand, saying unto thee, fear not, I will help thee. That was my prayer, but not for me, but for you and the boys. But today is Christmas. For me, the lights are on all over the world. I'm like a feather floating in the breeze. I am so happy I can hardly sit still alone enough to write. I want to shout it from the housetops. My son is back. My son is safe. But I don't want the neighbors to think I've lost my mind with joy. But I am going to phone everyone I know as soon as I can sign my name to this letter. I write again tomorrow. Take good care of yourself and write soon to one who loves you always. Yours, Mom. The letters then are extraordinarily important and form a bond across the miles. And again, the emotion is displayed in such a way they probably wouldn't do it face to face. Why did Joe Upchurch write then? First of all, he wants letters like this. He wants to prompt letters from home. Secondly, and this turns up, we're lucky enough at FSU to have a complete set of the newsletters that were published on that base, that Air Force base, or Army Air Force base, excuse me, in Foggia, Italy. And it's very interesting to see what was published every day, what was important to these men. First thing that turns up on the daily newsletter is how many planes did we lose? How many men got back? Extraordinarily important because it not only deals with my chances of getting back, did my friends make it back? And that friendship is incredibly important. I interviewed a sailor from World War II serving in the Atlantic. 3 ships sunk out from under him, lucky enough to survive. The gist of what he wanted to tell me, however, is he said, Bill, after that first ship went down, I deliberately never made another friend. I just couldn't handle it. In this newsletter then, how many planes did we lose? The second thing that turns up is, did the mail truck arrive? I don't have anything from Joe Upchurch to read you that would bring home the importance of this. We do have a very interesting POW collection, however. And this is a man writing from a POW camp in Germany. He's writing to himself. He's writing a poem which kind of sums up how these men feel. I'd like to read it to you because I'm sure Joe Upchurch felt the same way. And it's entitled, Our Weekly Letter. A thought of love, a word of cheer, your weekly message to someone dear. A line of words from your heart come stealing to let her know just how you're feeling. You write about the weather and say you're well, but there's so many things you cannot tell. You talk about old times and how much you miss her and hope to come back someday to kiss her. She doesn't know what you're going through. It would be mighty hard if she only knew. The long, hard days just sitting here, alone with your thoughts and your heart full of fear, that you may never return to your home again. All hope is gone. You live in vain. Yet as each week comes, you write once more the same old lines as the week before, and pray when she receives them, she'll never know better what you couldn't write in your weekly letter. They're very guarded, they're very careful, and they want those letters more than anything else. That base newsletter then, did my friend survive? Do I have a chance of surviving? Did the mail truck arrive? The interesting thing about how mail was handled then, as I'm sure you know, shipping is very scarce. Mistakes are made by the mail bureaucracy. Sometimes you go for months, then all of a sudden you get a basket full. Basketfuls are nice. As this poem says, we'd rather have it every week. We write then to prompt those replies. We prompt to maintain the connection. The other thing, and this you have to read between the lines for, I'm a Joe Upchurch and I'm writing from Foggia, Italy. I've just come back from that Ploiest run, or I was on one of the first runs to the Soviet Union, one of the shuttle bombing runs. I don't know how I'm going to survive. But if you're writing letters like a normal person does, normal people survive. The letter then is not merely a means of communication. It's not merely a means of hearing from the home one you love or communicating with that home one. It also guarantees that you're doing something that average people at home do, that you did it before the war, and God bless you, hopefully you'll do it after the war too, because you're doing something that is normal. As a way of summing up, I'd like you to, as I told some of you before the talk, I've been working on this for years. Mike Upchurch, Joe's and Pat's son's been after me. Every 4 or 5 months I get an email from him and say, where the heck is the book, Bill? Besides sending Pat copies and the various relatives copies, obviously Mike got a copy. And I think you'd appreciate, since it sums up much of what I've been saying, to hear what he had, his reaction. Dr. Oldson. I finished the book last week and loved it. Frankly, I learned a lot about my father I never knew. He was never prone to having personal conversations with his sons. He asked questions, he gave commands, military style. So it was illuminating to read he had a softer, almost emotional style in communicating with Mom. In short, you made him more human to me, more three-dimensional. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for choosing my father's words to represent the everyman involved in heavy bombing flying in the defense of our country. You have sparked an understanding of the man I called my father. A search for more information on the planes and tactics used. Even the link trainer is on YouTube. A search probably being done by far more readers than my daughter, my son, and myself. And your work has sparked a fuller appreciation of the tremendous price paid for our defense. Thank you, Bill Oldson, for your labors in writing such an important piece of the puzzle heretofore missing in our modern society's understanding of the servicemen and women who physically and emotionally sacrificed so much of our freedoms during World War II. Gratefully yours, Mike Upchurch. Now, having read that, let me point out something else about Mike Upchurch and the people he flew with. If he was here tonight and listening to all this, he'd be embarrassed to tears. One of the problems we have in getting people to donate, or more when I try to get people to give me an interview, is they're scared to death that they're becoming the center of attention, or that we're going to think they're bragging. If I can quote Mike Upchurch, and many like him, I was just doing my job. I flew that B-17. Thank you very much for coming. Were there any, like I said at the start, I'm not an expert on Thomasville, but if you'd like to know something about letters or about Joe Upchurch's letters, how they fit into the bigger scheme of things of memoirs of World War II, I can tell you. All right, any questions? Currently, I said we have, what I am, about 6,800, but somewhere around 6,800 collections. The heart of it is, of course, the letters, the diaries, that sort of thing. A lot of memorabilia. The binoculars I just described. One of the most fascinating things I have in my office, you walk in and turn right on the bookcases, it's a bottle of scotch. It was given to us by an infantryman who fought in the Battle of the Bulge at Bastogne, and it was given to him during the Battle of the Bulge by a Methodist minister. Now, I had a Methodist minister come by and take a tour a few days or a few weeks ago, and he just shook his head. But again, the letters and the diaries, the background information is so important. I mentioned the problem, how do you get binoculars that are 3 feet long and 2 feet wide home? Let me ask you this. You're an 18-year-old rifleman at Bastogne. You're freezing to death. You're scared to death. Your chaplain gives you a bottle of scotch. This is unopened. Unopened. Right. It not only pleases you and your buddies to drink it, that bottle of scotch buys you literally anything. After Patton gets there, it can buy you a furlough, maybe a promotion. It can buy you some things forbidden by the Bible. But I would love, all I know is how the man got it. More important, I'd like to know how he got it home. You know? It's just unbelievable. One of the other things we have in my office, we've got a drawing, cartoon. We have lots of in my World War II class right now, my students each have to write a long paper and defend it. Everybody in the class reads everybody else's paper. It's a senior seminar, you have to have this to graduate, or something like it. She's writing down cartoons. One of them is on a piece of blueprint paper like this. It's the war in the South Pacific as fought by cavemen. It's very elaborate, very well done. It's not quite Andy Marlette in terms of cartooning, but very skillfully done. Obviously, it took a long, long time. That's why I was emphasizing with the letters, the men are bored out of their minds on occasion. So how do you keep your mind off home, your girlfriend, your fear? You write a letter, you draw something like this. It gives you an insight, I think, into the young men and young women that you can't get any other way. The letters, the diaries, whatever. The diaries in particular are extremely fascinating. When I first started the Institute, I had a man come by, a man by the name of Tillman Rutledge. He was captured at Bataan. He was on one of the hell ships. At the end of the war, he's a slave laborer in the Mitsubishi coal mine. Anybody in here 6'2"? Nobody? How much do you weigh, Joe?
215.
This man weighed 89 pounds. He kept a diary, tiny little diary. Not supposed to, if he had been caught with that diary, he would have been executed on the spot, beheaded. 1997, he's standing in the corner of my office crying. He's saying, I don't want to give it to you, Bill, but my kids will throw it away. I mean, all I can tell you is we get a lot of stuff that was sitting on trash cans. We had one woman gave us her husband stuff, came back the following spring with a huge naval album, all his letters, personnel file, this sort of thing. Family next door, old people had died, young people are clearing it out. This is sitting on the trash can. So you just went over the trash can, picked it up, and brought it to me. Any one of these things is not important in and of itself. You get enough of these, perhaps you see some patterns, perhaps you get another sense for what the humanity of our troops, our people were like as they fight this war. You get the same thing in the interviews. You never know what's going to pop up. Again, to harp on what I told you about Joe Upchurch just doing my job, let me give you an example of something from my wife's family. She has an uncle, dead now, who B-17s, flying out of Hosea 2, flying over Ploiești, among other things. I tried for years to get him to let me interview him. No, just doing my job, just doing my job. Finally, one Sunday, I went over with a bottle of bourbon, and we had a long conversation. Turns out, on one of those raids over Ploiești, windscreen on this B-17's blown out. He managed to get the plane back, got the Silver Star for it. Took me another couple tries to get that out of him. Just doing my job, Bill. Extraordinary bravery and extraordinary competence, too, to get that plane back. Not all of it's grim. We also have, there's the humorous side of it, too. I can just give you one example. One of the members of our board comes from a very distinguished military family. He gave us an enormous amount of material, which will generate, I'm sure, lots of dissertations, lots of final papers and that sort of thing. Dad was an admiral, founded the Seabees. Brother went to Annapolis. They wanted to get him into Annapolis, couldn't get in, bad eyes. Well, can we just get him in? Any sort of, can he file papers? No. Wouldn't let him in under any circumstances. Well, if you want insight into the services, the bureaucracy, the red tape, Navy wouldn't take him, wouldn't even let him file papers. The Army took him and gave him a tank to drive. Now again, none of this changes who won World War II or any of it, but you're seeing the human beings that fought the war. You don't get this out of a textbook. I've taught World War II and Holocaust history for decades. We haven't got time to go into stuff like this, or even, we don't have the students that want to do it, but it tells them what human beings are like. If I give you a final example, the World War II seminar I teach, this is called a senior seminar, I teach it every semester. If you're a graduating major in history at FSU, you have to have a senior seminar, you can't graduate. In mine, the students have to write a final paper. They must go into the institute and use this sort of material. If they don't, they just do the usual cut and paste, they're not going to make it. And Ann handles most of this sort of stuff, pulling materials away. It's a real shock for the students. They think history comes out of a textbook. And all of a sudden, they want to do cartoons like this one woman's doing for me. Ann comes in with a box. All right, here's 5,000 items. Look at it. The other interesting thing is watching them grow up. All of a sudden they realize what history is, how you write it. And once in a while I'm lucky enough to have a vet in class. Last semester I had 2 submarine vets. They did World War II submarines. It made a different impression on the class. I also had a paratrooper. And you imagine he did World War II paratroopers. And the discussion sometimes doesn't always pivot on the history itself. The paratrooper at one time, after we've done the more technical stuff, he asked the class, you know what the most wonderful sound in the whole world is? Pop. This guy left the service because of a broken back. One time he didn't go pop. The other thing is watching then finally dawn on them. They think people like me, my age, gray hair, fought World War II. Most of them have seen Saving Private Ryan. They think every time somebody died, one staff car grew up with an admiral, another staff car with a general, a third staff car with a congressman, a fourth staff car with the chaplain. We have a number of those. You probably remember them. The flags that were flown in the windows. They had a blue star. You had a child serving overseas, a gold star. Somebody died overseas. In counteracting the Saving Private Ryan syndrome, we also have some of the telegrams. Guess what? Your child just died. And of course, the kids in class went, that's all? Well, we had 1/3 people killed. Tens of thousands missing. We don't have time to do this. This is the way it works in wartime, that you just get this telegram. One of the most interesting things I have in my office, everybody's seen the picture of the raising the flag, Mount Suribachi. I've got an original given to the Institute by the president of the Combat Photographers Association. And it's much different than what you see in the textbook. It's a signed Rosenthal picture, but the photography is much better. You actually see the creases in the men's fatigues. If you don't know it, the picture's slightly cropped. Just to the right of it is the platoon sergeant, a man by the name of Butch Thomas from Tallahassee. His sister gave me a number of things. Butch Thomas was taken off Iwo Jima, taken out to the admiral's ship, given the Navy Star, put back on Iwo Jima, a day later is dead. One of the letters that his sister gave me comes with this thing on it, return to sender, deceased. Little girl in Alabama saw his picture in the paper and thought, my gosh, that kid's cute. And the little letter is to him, basically asking for a date when he gets home. And she tells him how tall she is, what her hair color is, what her eye color is, and that she's well built and has a nice personality. Now, the sad part, of course, is that he's already dead and been dead. It's interesting that using this sort of material with my students, and nobody in my class, by the way, is as young as that 20-year-old B-17 pilot. They're 21, 22, and so on. It's really interesting when I have one of these vets in class. 2 years ago, I had an Afghan vet, combat engineer. And he was delighted, by the way, to learn that World War II had combat engineers. I don't know what he thought they did in World War II. But Ann, who pulls all the materials for us, she'll tell you, usually you have to dog students, dog them get to do the work. This guy wouldn't leave. You'd have to throw him out at closing time. But it was really interesting when we started having discussions, reading and defending the papers. There's 13 of us in there. 11 people like ordinary students, me, I'm sitting at one end of the table, and my combat engineer sitting at the other end. And some of the comments reflected the 21 and 22-year-old naivete. And he'd look at me and go, you know, there were 2 adults and 11 children in there. But the interesting, he was maybe 2 years old. This was a kid who had gone to Florida, drank his way out of it, gone in the service, come back. And not only the maturity, but the attention to detail. You notice this in the vets. My paratrooper, my submariners, my combat engineer, I just give them the syllabus, and they follow it. The other 11, Dr. Oldson, was that on the syllabus? I didn't know we had a paper due today. I only missed one sentence. The letters then, like Joe Upchurch's, are a godsend in terms of not only preserving the history, preserving the slice of life, going back and forth from a Thomasville, but in terms of reaching the next generation, the generation after them, and making them realize, or not merely know the facts, but realize something about the humanity involved. They're absolutely priceless. In my specialty, let me end up with this, in my specialty, which is the Holocaust and the war in Eastern Europe, we have one letter written by a battalion commander. This is spring of 1945, and it kind of sums up all the things I've said about the letters. He's writing home to his wife. His battalion has just liberated one of the satellite camps. If you're not aware of it, Auschwitz, Buchenwald, Treblinka, these are the big ones. There's 900 satellite camps. His battalion just liberated one of them. And he's writing home to his wife, and he says, I had heard about this. I didn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. Didn't want to believe it. I'm going to kill every damn German I can find. Man, woman, or child. Get this war over with and never let it happen again. Somber, but if you want to know the spirit of our men, the spirit of the times at the end of the war, and the importance of the letters, preserving those letters, this does it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I know we all learned a lot, and I want to tell Bill that we're also very pleased to have one of his graduate students as our first intern here. She's doing a great job for us, and she's worked with the papers in your collection. I'm going to turn the program over for a few minutes to Joe Brown, who has some special editions.
Thank you. Well, we're very pleased to have one of our 20-year-old, 19-year-old pilots who went through World War II flying B-17s here tonight, Jim Armstrong. Remember, Jim wrote a book called Escape about his experience as he greeted the French coming out of the sky in his parachute in a way he didn't anticipate, but made a lot of friendships over the years. That book, Escape, tells it all. But tonight he's here to do two things. First of all, to give to you letters that he received and his mother received in World War II and after. So, Jim, would you want to come up and present these to Dr. Oldson, if you would?
I saved these for a long time.
Thank you. You are a good man in so many ways.
But I'm moving up to Lawrenceville on the 30th of March, and I didn't want to take these along with me without giving them away, because it's letters that I've saved through the years. They are disintegrating. And it's about the telegram that my mother got when I was shot down in France in 1943. It was Labor Day, the 6th of September, and it was no picnic. But I'm a survivor. And so I present this to you, Doctor, and put it in the archives.
How old a pilot were you? How old were you when you were flying?
When I was 20 years old.
Okay.
20 years old and had a crew
See,
of
he
9
vouches
men.
for me.
And then I was shot down I was old man of 21. Because I'd been on some rough missions at that time. Schweitfurt was the first one that I went on. That was terrible. Lost a two-prong attack. 60 bombers were lost. When you flew then, you didn't know whether you're going to be back or not. But I didn't have a wife at times. I didn't have to worry too much. But my mother, that was the only one.
Thank you so much.
Straighten up and fly right. Straighten up and stay right. Straighten up and fly right. Cool down, Papa, don't you blow your top.